Florence's white cane tapped against the polished marble floor. 3 taps. Pause. 2 more. She counted every step because counting was how she moved through a world she could no longer see. 37 steps from the entrance of the department store to the perfume counter. 12 more to the escalator she had no intention of taking. 9 to the left, and she should hit the corridor that led to the east exit where her sister Noel had promised to meet her 15 minutes ago. Noel was not there 15 minutes ago. Noel was not there now. Noel had answered a phone call from her boyfriend and wandered off somewhere between handbags and jewelry, leaving Florence standing in the middle of a luxury shopping center she had never wanted to visit in the first place. Florence adjusted the paper coffee cup in her left hand and shifted direction. She was off. She did not know she was off, but she was. The corridor she needed was 11 steps to her right, not 9 to her left. She was walking directly into the main atrium, where the floors were even more polished and the people moved faster and nobody paid attention to a woman with a white cane, because this was the kind of place where everyone was too busy spending money to notice anything else. She collided with something solid. Not a wall, not a display. A person. The impact was direct, center mass, and the coffee cup in her hand crushed between her body and theirs. The lid popped. Dark roast splashed forward, and she heard the liquid hit fabric. Expensive fabric. The kind that absorbed liquid with a soft hiss instead of a wet slap. 3 people nearby gasped. Actually gasped. Florence heard all 3 of them distinctly. One woman to her left sucked in air through her teeth. A man somewhere behind her muttered something in Korean. A third person, farther away, whispered, "Oh no." The silence that followed was heavy. The kind of silence that falls over a room when something has gone very wrong. Florence extended her hand forward, holding the crumpled napkin she had wrapped around the base of her cup. "I am so sorry. Here, let me." She was aiming about 6 inches, to the left of where the person actually stood. A hand caught her wrist. The grip was firm but not rough. Gentle, even. The person did not pull her. They guided her hand so the napkin actually made contact with the wet fabric. "You missed," a voice said. Low, calm. Male. There was the faintest trace of an accent underneath American English, like a shadow just beneath the surface of still water. And there was no anger in the voice, which confused Florence because the gasps she had heard told her she had just ruined something very expensive on someone very important. "I'm blind," Florence said flatly. "I miss a lot of things." She expected that to end the conversation. It usually did. People either apologized too much, got uncomfortable, or walked away. Those were the 3 responses she had cataloged over the past 3 years. Apology, discomfort, departure. This man did none of those things. "The coffee," he said. "Was it good before you wore it?" Florence paused. It was fine. Just fine. It was a $4 black coffee from the kiosk near the south entrance. It was not going to change my life. It changed my shirt. Florence pressed her lips together. She did not know what this man looked like. She did not know what his shirt looked like, or how much it cost, or why people around them were still frozen as though someone had pulled a fire alarm. She only knew that his hand was still on her wrist, his grip warm and steady, and that something about the way he spoke made her feel like he was not annoyed. He was interested, and people were not usually interested in Florence. Not anymore. "Can I replace your coffee?" he asked. "Can you replace your shirt?" she responded. The silence shifted. It was not uncomfortable this time. She heard something she could not see but could feel. He almost smiled. She did not know how she knew that. She just did. "Min Jun," a second male voice said from a few steps away. Sharp, tight. The voice of someone whose job was to keep things under control and who felt things slipping. "We should go. You have the meeting at 3. The hand on Florence's wrist did not move. "Cancel it," the man apparently named Min Jun said. The second voice went silent. The kind of silent that meant someone had just heard something they never expected to hear. Florence pulled her wrist back gently. "You don't need to cancel anything. I ruined your shirt and I'm sorry and I'm going to find my sister now." "You're going the wrong direction," Min Jun said. Florence felt heat rise in her cheeks. "And how would you know which direction I'm going?" "Because you've been walking toward the stockroom entrance for the last 30 steps. Unless your sister works here, the exit is behind you and to your right." Florence hated this. She hated needing directions. She hated being corrected. She hated that this stranger with his ruined shirt and his calm voice was right. "Fine," she said. "Thank you." She turned. She made it 4 steps before he spoke again. "Can I walk you to the exit?" "I don't need an escort." "I know. I'm offering anyway." Florence stopped. 3 years of blindness had taught her many things, but the most important one was this. She could hear intention in a voice the way sighted people could read a face. Pity had a frequency. Condescension had a texture. Genuine interest had a warmth that was almost impossible to fake. This man's voice was warm. She did not say yes. She just started walking, slower this time, and he fell into step beside her. He did not take her arm. He did not touch her cane. He simply walked at her pace, matching his stride to hers, and when they reached the east exit, he stopped. "Your sister," he said. "Brown jacket, talking on the phone near the fountain." Florence sighed. "That sounds like Noel." "She's about 40 feet to your left." Florence nodded. She started to walk away, then stopped. "I really am sorry about the shirt." "I'm not," Minjun said. Florence did not know what to do with that, so she did what she always did when something caught her off guard. She kept walking. She found Noel. Noel immediately started apologizing for disappearing, and then went dead silent when she looked over Florence's shoulder and saw 2 men in dark suits standing near the exit, one of them watching Florence walk away with an expression Noel could not quite read. "Who was that?" Noel asked. "I don't know," Florence said. "Someone whose shirt I ruined." They left. Florence did not ask the man's name. She did not look back because she could not look back. She could not look at anything. But Minjun Park stood at that exit for another full minute, watching a woman with a white cane disappear into the Arizona afternoon, and something shifted in his chest that he did not have a name for. He had not almost smiled in 4 months. He had almost smiled twice in the last 5 minutes. "Who was she?" Seung-ho asked from behind him. "Find out," Minjun said. Seung-ho stared at him. 8 years. 8 years he had worked for Minjun Park. 8 years of 14-hour days, international flights, tense negotiations, and impossible problems solved before breakfast. In all of that time, Minjun had never once asked about a stranger. Not once. Seung-ho pulled out his phone and made a call. "Now let me ask you something. If a complete stranger spilled coffee on you and you realized they could not see you at all, would you walk away? Or would something make you stay? Let me know in the comment section." Minjun sat in the back of his black Escalade in the parking structure beneath Kierland Commons. Seung-ho drove. The air conditioning hummed. Neither of them spoke for 3 full minutes, which was unusual because Seung-ho always had logistics to review, schedules to confirm, problems to solve. Today, Seung-ho was watching the rearview mirror. Minjun was staring out the window at nothing. "Her name is Florence Adami," Seung-ho finally said. 27, lives in Tempe, lost her sight 3 years ago, degenerative retinal condition, works as a voiceover artist. Freelance, studio rental by the hour, no criminal record, no debt besides medical bills. Sister is Noel Adami, 30, lives in Memphis. Minjun said nothing. "She is nobody," Seung-ho added. He did not mean it cruelly. He meant it in the way their world measured people. No connections, no leverage, no power, no wealth. In their world, she did not register. "She's not nobody," Minjun said quietly. Seung-ho drove. Minjun Park was the CEO of Park Consolidated, a Korean-American business empire that controlled real estate, technology, and private security operations across the entire American Southwest. His penthouse in Paradise Valley overlooked Camelback Mountain. He owned a 30-story building in downtown Los Angeles. His name carried weight in boardrooms from Beverly Hills to Bellevue. He was 31 years old, and he controlled more money than most people could conceptualize. Behind the corporate title, there was another layer. Minjun operated in the gray spaces between business and power. Protection, influence, high-stakes negotiation. When disputes arose between powerful families, Korean or otherwise, Minjun was the man who resolved them, sometimes with a handshake, sometimes with a phone call that made people reconsider their choices. He was not violent. He did not need to be. His reputation was enough. Everyone in his world either feared him or wanted something from him. Every single person, without exception. Until today. Until a woman who could not see him spilled coffee on his shirt and was annoyed about losing her $4 drink and did not care who he was because she could not see the suit or the watch or the 2 bodyguards flanking him. She just heard a voice, and she responded to the voice, not the power. Min-jun did not know what to do with that. So he sat in his car and said nothing and thought about a crumpled napkin aimed 6 inches in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, Florence was in Noel's rental car, heading back to her apartment in Tempe. The apartment was a modest 1-bedroom near Arizona State University. Clean, organized with military precision because when you were blind, everything had to be exactly where you left it or the whole system collapsed. Cans in the pantry arranged by size, clothes organized by texture, furniture that never moved. Noel had flown in from Memphis 3 days ago because she was worried. Noel was always worried. She had reason to be. Florence had been disappearing, not dramatically, not in any way that would make headlines or trigger emergency calls. She was disappearing quietly. She had stopped answering phone calls consistently. She had cut her grocery orders in half. She had declined 2 voiceover contracts last month without explanation. Her world was getting smaller. Every month, she shaved off another piece of it. Another friend she stopped responding to. Another invitation she turned down. Another meal she skipped, because ordering food required energy she did not have. Noel saw it all. She saw the nearly empty refrigerator. She saw the stack of unopened mail on the counter. She saw her sister sitting in a dark apartment, dark because Florence did not bother turning on lights since they made no difference to her, and she wanted to scream. But the thing that broke Noel was the drawer. She found it while Florence was in the shower. A kitchen drawer stuffed with medical bills and insurance denial letters and one document that made Noel's hands shake. It was a printout from a medical journal. Someone had printed it for Florence, probably her ophthalmologist. It described an experimental surgical procedure being developed at a specialty clinic in Houston. The procedure targeted exactly Florence's type of retinal degeneration. Early trials showed a 40 to 60% chance of restoring partial vision. Not full, partial, but partial was everything when you had nothing. The cost was listed at the bottom, $480,000, not covered by insurance, not covered by any program Noel could find. Florence had never mentioned it, not once, not to Noel, not to their parents, not to anyone. When Florence came out of the shower, Noel was sitting on the couch holding the document. Florence heard the paper rustling and knew immediately. "Don't," Florence said. "Florence, this says there is a surgery that could." "I know what it says." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it doesn't matter. I cannot afford it. You cannot afford it. Mom and Dad cannot afford it. It might as well be a brochure for a vacation on Mars. We could fundraise, we could." "Noel, stop." Florence's voice was flat, not angry, tired. The kind of tired that came from 3 years of waking up in the dark and going to sleep in the dark and filling every hour in between with just enough activity to convince herself she was still living rather than just existing. "I have made peace with this," Florence said. Noel heard the lie. Florence heard herself say it and knew it was a lie too. But lies were easier than hope when hope cost $480,000. They did not speak about it again that night. Noel fell asleep on the couch. Florence lay in her bed and pressed her palms against her closed eyes and remembered what colors looked like. Red was the hardest. She was starting to forget red. The next morning, Florence walked to the small recording studio she rented by the hour for her voiceover work. It was a 15-minute walk she had memorized step by step. Left out the front door, 40 steps to the corner, right turn, 212 steps to the next intersection, cross, continue straight for another 300 steps. The studio entrance was between a nail salon and a print shop, and she could find it by the smell of acetone from the salon and the hum of the printers from the shop. She did not know that a black Escalade had been parked on her street since dawn. 3 days later, Florence was at a cafe in Old Town Scottsdale. It was called Cartel Coffee Lab, and she knew it well enough to navigate without help. 7 steps from the door to the counter. Order. Wait. 12 steps to the back wall. 3rd chair from the left. She always sat in the third chair from the left because it was near an outlet where she could charge her phone and far enough from the speakers that she could hear her scripts through her earbuds without cranking the volume. She was reviewing a new audiobook narration contract, listening to the sample chapter through her earbuds and making mental notes on packing and tone. She was good at this, better than good. Before she lost her sight, Florence had been a rising broadcast journalist in Memphis. She had a voice that made people stop what they were doing and listen. After the blindness took her career, the voice was all she had left, and she had turned it into something that kept her rent paid and her dignity intact. Barely. She felt someone sit down across from her. The chair scraped softly against the concrete floor. She assumed it was a stranger taking the open seat. The cafe was usually crowded on Tuesdays. She removed one earbud and ignored them. "You take your coffee black," the voice said. "That explains why the stain on my shirt was so hard to remove." Florence went completely still. Low, calm, that shadow of an accent beneath the surface. She recognized it instantly. Her body recognized it before her brain caught up, which bothered her. "Are you following me?" she asked. "I am sitting in a coffee shop," Minjun said. "You walked in." This was technically true. What Florence did not know was that Minjun had learned her routine. He knew she came here every Tuesday and Thursday. He had chosen this specific day. He had arrived 40 minutes before her. He had a laptop open in front of him that he had not looked at once. He did not fully understand why he was here. He only knew that he had not stopped thinking about the woman who ruined his shirt and did not apologize properly and did not care who he was. "You're the man from the department store," Florence said. "Minjun. You remember my name." "I remember everything I hear. It's how I survive." Minjun studied her face. She was beautiful in a way that demanded attention. Fair brown skin, high cheekbones, full lips pressed together in a line that said she was deciding whether to stay or leave. Her eyes were deep brown and unfocused, aimed slightly past his left shoulder. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun. She looked like someone who had stopped trying to impress the world and somehow became more striking because of it. "I need you to know something," Florence said. "I can't see your face. I can't read your expressions. I don't know if you're smiling or frowning or lying. So I need you to understand that if you ever lie to me, I will hear it in your voice eventually. I always do." "I believe you," Minjun said, and he meant it. They talked for 40 minutes. It started adversarial. Florence asked pointed questions. What did he do? He said he ran a company. What kind of company? A large one. She told him that was not an answer. He told her it was the only one he had right now. She said that was strike one. He asked how many strikes he got. She said 3, and then she was leaving. He asked about her work. She told him about voiceover narration, audiobooks, commercial spots. He asked her to demonstrate. Florence almost said no. Then something petty and competitive flickered inside her. The part of her that used to chase stories and nail live broadcasts and prove every doubter wrong. And she picked up a sugar packet from the table. She read the ingredients on the back of that sugar packet as if they were the opening paragraph of a best-selling novel. Her voice dropped half an octave. The pace slowed. Every word landed with precision and warmth and just enough dramatic tension to make dextrose sound like the beginning of an epic. Minjun laughed. It was genuine, unexpected. It came out of him before he could stop it, and the sound surprised even him. 3 tables away, Seung-ho, who was pretending to read a newspaper, nearly dropped his phone. He had not heard Minjun laugh in months. Florence heard the laugh and felt something warm spread through her chest. She ignored it. Minjun asked about her blindness directly. No tiptoeing, no careful phrasing, just a straightforward question, what happened? She appreciated the directness. Most people danced around it like the word blind was a landmine. Florence explained the condition, degenerative, gradual. She woke up one morning 3 years ago and the edges of her vision were gone, like someone was slowly pulling curtains closed from both sides. 6 months later, the center followed. She described it with a matter-of-fact tone that Minjun recognized. It was the same tone he used when he talked about his mother's death. It was the voice of someone who had packed their grief into a very small box and shoved it somewhere deep, where it could not interfere with daily function. He understood that voice. He used it every day. As they stood to leave, a man at the counter bumped into Florence roughly. Her cane clattered to the floor. The man muttered something under his breath about watching where she was going. Minjun's demeanor changed. The warmth vanished. Something cold and sharp replaced it, like a blade being unsheathed. He turned toward the man. The look on his face made the barista behind the counter take a full step back. Minjun stepped close to the man, very close, and he said something so quietly that even Florence, with her heightened hearing, could not make out the words. The man went pale. He apologized to Florence loudly and clearly. He picked up her cane and held it out to her with both hands. Then he left the cafe quickly, almost running. Florence felt the shift in the room. The energy, the fear. It hung in the air like static before a thunderstorm. "What did you say to him?" she asked. "I asked him to apologize to you," Minjun said. His voice was calm again, warm again. Florence did not believe that was all he said. She let it go, but she filed it away. That night, Minjun was in his penthouse in Paradise Valley when his phone rang. The number on the screen made his jaw tighten. He answered it. The voice on the other end was male, older, cold, speaking in Korean. "She is going to become a problem for you, Minjun, and you know what we do with problems." Minjun hung up without responding. He stood at his window overlooking the Scottsdale skyline, the city glittering below him like a circuit board, and he dialed Seung-ho. "Double the detail on her," he said. "No one gets close." Over the next 2 weeks, Minjun and Florence built a routine that neither of them acknowledged out loud. He appeared at the cafe every Tuesday and Thursday. They talked. He learned that she could identify every spice in any dish by smell alone. She learned that he loved old American jazz records, Coltrane and Miles Davis especially, which surprised her because she had expected something different from a Korean businessman. And she told him that, and he asked what she had expected, and she said K-pop, and he said he would rather listen to traffic. He started walking her home. She resisted fiercely. "I have walked myself home for 3 years. And I am walking in the same direction. You live in Paradise Valley. My apartment is in Tempe. Those are not the same direction." "They are today." She let him walk her. She told herself it was because arguing with him took more energy than agreeing. That was not the reason. He brought her food, Korean food from a restaurant in Tempe, jjajangmyeon in a takeout container still warm. She opened it and inhaled and identified 8 of the 9 ingredients on the first try. Fermented black bean paste, pork, onion, zucchini, potato, garlic, sesame oil, cornstarch. She missed the cabbage. 8 out of 9, Minjun said. "That's remarkable." "That's annoying," Florence said. "Which one did I miss?" "Cabbage." "Cabbage betrays me every time." Minjun watched her eat with chopsticks she handled with practiced ease. She told him she had learned from a college roommate. She told him about Memphis, about growing up in a household where her mother cooked every night and her father played guitar on the porch, and her sister Noel was the loud one, and Florence was the quiet one who watched everything from the corner of the room. "And now you can't watch anything," Minjun said. It was blunt. Anyone else would have flinched away from saying it. Florence appreciated it. "No," she said. "Now I listen, and listening tells you more than watching ever did." She learned pieces of Minjun's past in fragments. His mother had died 4 years ago, ovarian cancer. He said it quickly, the way you say something you have said too many times. His father was alive, but they had not spoken in 2 years, a falling out over the direction of the company. Minjun had wanted to expand into technology and clean energy. His father had wanted to keep things as they were. The argument escalated until it was not about business anymore. It was about control. It was about a son who refused to be a copy of his father and a father who could not accept a son who was not. Florence heard the pain in his voice when he talked about his mother. She heard the anger when he talked about his father. She filed both away. Before she lost her sight, Florence had been more than a rising journalist. She had been offered a position at a network affiliate in Nashville. It was everything she had worked for. The blindness took it in 6 months. Her career, her confidence, her fiancé. His name was Grant. Grant had proposed on a rooftop in downtown Memphis with a ring he could barely afford and a speech about forever. 6 weeks after Florence's diagnosis, Grant sat her down and said, "I didn't sign up for this." He said it like the blindness was a breach of contract, like she had deceived him by getting sick. He left. Florence had not been in a relationship since. She did not trust that anyone would stay. History had taught her that people loved the idea of loyalty more than the practice of it. She did not tell Minjun about Grant, not yet. While this fragile, careful thing was building between them, Minjun's world was closing in. His father, Park Yong-soo, arrived in Scottsdale unannounced. 71 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, sharp enough to cut glass. Yong-soo had built Park Consolidated from a single import business in a warehouse in Koreatown, Los Angeles, into a multi-billion-dollar empire. He had sacrificed everything for it: his marriage, his health, his relationship with his only son. And he was not about to watch Minjun risk it for a woman. Because Yong-soo had heard about Florence, his network of informants was nearly as vast as Minjun's, older, more embedded, the kind of people who reported back not out of loyalty but out of habit. The meeting happened in Minjun's penthouse. Yong-soo stood by the window with his hands behind his back, looking out at Camelback Mountain. An unknown woman, Yong-soo said in Korean. Blind, no connections, no family name, no wealth. This is not a strategic choice, Minjun. I did not ask for your assessment. The alliances we have built with the Choi family, the Han Group, the investors in Palo Alto, all of it depends on perception, on strength. A leader who is distracted is a leader who is vulnerable. I am not distracted. Yong-soo turned from the window. His eyes were the same shape as Minjun's, the same dark intensity, but where Minjun's held fire, Yong-soo's held ice. Your mother would be disappointed, Yong-soo said. Minjun gripped the edge of his desk. The wood creaked under his fingers. He did not respond. If he opened his mouth right now, he would say something that could never be taken back. Yong-soo left. Minjun stood in his office for a long time after his father was gone. The anger did not fade. It sank into his bones and stayed there. 3 days later, Florence was recording a voiceover session in her rented studio. She was halfway through a chapter of an audiobook, a thriller about a woman on the run, and her voice was steady and controlled and hitting every beat perfectly. Then the power cut. Her equipment died. The hum of the air conditioning stopped. The room went silent. For Florence, the world did not change visually. It was dark before and it was dark now, but the sounds changed. The building sounds disappeared, and new sounds replaced them. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, approaching her studio door. A piece of paper slid under the door with a soft hiss. Florence sat very still. She could not read it. She waited until the footsteps retreated and the power returned 10 minutes later. Her studio manager, a college kid named Devon, found the note and read it to her. Stay away from Minjun Park. This is your only warning. Florence's hands shook, not from fear, from anger. She had spent 3 years having things taken from her, her sight, her career, her confidence, her future, and now someone she did not know was trying to take away the first person who had made her feel like herself in years. She did not call Minjun. She called Noel. I need you to tell me everything you can find about a man named Minjun Park. Noel searched. What she found, the business empire, the power, the rumors about influence that stretched beyond boardrooms, made her beg Florence to walk away. Florence said, no. Florence confronted Minjun the next time he showed up at the cafe. She did not sit down. She stood in front of his table, cane in one hand, the other hand flat on the table's surface so she could ground herself physically, because what she was about to do required every ounce of courage she had. You need to tell me who you really are, she said. Right now, no half-truths. Someone threatened me and I think it is because of you, and I deserve to know why. The cafe went quiet. 2 baristas stopped mid-pour. A woman at a nearby table looked up from her laptop. Seung-ho, at his usual post 3 tables away, set down his newspaper. Minjun looked at Florence standing above him, jaw set, shoulders squared. She was 5'6" and 130 pounds, and she was staring in his general direction with unfocused eyes that somehow pinned him in place more effectively than anyone who had ever looked directly at him. He told her the truth, all of it. Park Consolidated was not just a business. It was a power structure, real estate, technology, and private security on the surface. Beneath that, a network of influence, protection, and strategic relationships that stretched from Scottsdale to San Francisco to Seoul. When disputes arose between powerful families, Min Jun resolved them. When someone needed protection that law enforcement could not provide, they came to him. When deals needed to be made in rooms that did not officially exist, Min Jun was the man at the table. He told her he was not a good man by most people's definitions. He told her he had never harmed anyone who did not come at him first. He told her the people threatening her were likely connected to a rival operation, the Yoon family out of San Francisco, who had been trying to undermine his business for 2 years. Florence listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 10 seconds. "Are you done?" "Yes." "Is any of it going to hurt me?" He paused, 1 beat 2. "Not while I'm alive." Florence sat down. She ordered her coffee, and something between them shifted from fragile to permanent, like wet concrete setting in the sun. But the Yoon family was not finished. Min Jun's operation to neutralize the Yoon threat was already underway when Seung-ho delivered news that changed everything. The Yoon family, through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, had acquired controlling interest in the specialty medical clinic in Houston, the one that performed the experimental procedure for retinal degeneration, the one that could restore Florence's sight. The Yoons now controlled whether Florence would ever see again, and they knew exactly what that leverage was worth. Min Jun received this information in his office at 9 in the evening. He read Seung-ho's report twice. He set it down. He walked to the window. "Options," he said. "We could attempt a counter-acquisition, but they've locked the ownership structure behind 3 holding companies in 2 different countries. Legal challenge would take 18 months minimum. By then they'll have restructured again." The surgeon. "Dr. Patel, she's under a new employment contract with the Yoon-controlled entity, non-compete clause. She can't perform the procedure anywhere else for 3 years." Other surgeons. 1. Dr. Choi Hae-won in Seoul. He pioneered the technique before Dr. Patel adapted it. He's semi-retired, takes almost no patients. Min Jun filed that away. That night, he drove to Florence's apartment. He had not planned what to say. He sat in his car outside her building for 11 minutes before going in. She opened the door after his knock. She was wearing an oversized Memphis Grizzlies shirt and sweatpants, and her hair was down, and she was the most disarming thing he had ever encountered. He did not tell her about the clinic. Not yet. Instead, he kissed her. It happened because she said, "You're standing in my doorway breathing like something is wrong. Either tell me or come inside." He came inside. They stood in her small living room. She could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from asphalt. "What happened?" she asked. "I need to tell you something." "Then tell me." "I have not let anyone this close in a very long time. And I don't know how to do it without wanting to protect you from everything, and I know that makes you angry, and I don't know how to stop." Florence reached out. Her fingers found his jaw. She traced the line of it. She felt a small scar near his ear. She did not ask about it. Not now. She mapped his face with her fingertips the way she mapped every space she inhabited, carefully and thoroughly, until she had built a picture in her mind that was more detailed than anything eyes could have given her. She kissed him. It was soft at first, careful. 2 people who had forgotten how to be vulnerable remembering at the same time. Then it was not careful. Then it was his hands framing her face like she was the most important thing he had ever held, and her fingers gripping the front of his shirt, and both of them forgetting for a few minutes that the world outside this room was dangerous and complicated and closing in. The next morning, Seung-ho called with the news about the Yoon acquisition. Min Jun stood in Florence's kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. Watching her pour coffee, she could not see into a mug she had found by touch, and he realized the Yoons had just found the one weapon that could break them both. Min Jun went to war quietly. He did not tell Florence about the clinic. He told himself he was protecting her. He told himself he needed a solution before he presented the problem. But underneath those justifications, the truth was simpler and uglier. He was afraid. Afraid that if he told her someone had stolen her only chance at seeing again, and that it was because of him, she would do exactly what she should do. Leave. So he worked. Meetings in his Lowe's Angels high-rise with legal teams who specialized in corporate acquisition warfare. Encrypted calls with allies in Palo Alto and Bellevue. A flight to San Francisco to meet face-to-face with a contact who had inside knowledge of the Yoon family's financial structure. Florence noticed. He canceled their Thursday cafe meeting for the first time since the routine began. He still called every night, but his voice was different, distracted, clipped. She asked him what was wrong. He said work. She said, "That's not a real answer." He said it was the only one he had right now. She recognized that line. He had used it on her the very first time they talked. It was his deflection, his wall. Florence decided to give him space. This was her pattern. When things felt uncertain, she retreated, shrink the world a little more, pull back another inch, protect what was left. Noel called from Memphis. "How are things with your mysterious Korean billionaire?" "He's pulling away." "Or he's dealing with something he doesn't want to burden you with. Those are not the same thing, Flo. They feel the same when you can't see someone's face." While Min-jun was fighting the Yoons from the front, someone was undermining him from behind. His own father. Park Yong-soo contacted the Yoon family through an intermediary. His proposal was simple. He would provide the Yoons access to Park Consolidated's West Coast shipping contracts, worth tens of millions annually, in exchange for them pressuring Min-jun to end his relationship with Florence. Yong-soo believed he was protecting the empire. He believed Florence was a vulnerability that rivals would exploit. He believed he was doing what any father would do. The Yoons agreed. But they went further than Yong-soo intended. They were not interested in simply pressuring Min-jun. They wanted leverage they could hold over him indefinitely, and Florence's eyes were that leverage. A woman showed up at Florence's apartment on a Wednesday afternoon. She introduced herself as Cynthia from a nonprofit called New Vision Partners. She said the organization had identified Florence through her ophthalmologist's records as a candidate for a fully funded experimental surgery at the Houston clinic. A new grant program. No cost to Florence, just a phone consultation to start the process. Florence was suspicious. She asked pointed questions. Cynthia had answers for all of them, a website, a phone number, references from other patients. It was a professional operation, well-funded and well-rehearsed because the Yoon family did not do anything halfway. Florence agreed to the phone consultation. The consultation was with a real doctor who had been recruited and compensated by the Yoons to deliver a specific message. The surgery could be scheduled within 6 weeks. No cost. All expenses covered. Travel, procedure, recovery. She just needed to come to Houston. Florence sat on her couch after the call ended and pressed her hands against her eyes. For the first time in 3 years, she let herself hope. Really hope. The kind of hope that cracked open the small box she had sealed her grief inside and let light pour in. She cried, not from sadness, from the terrifying possibility that she might see again. She almost called Min-jun. She did not. Something held her back, she did not know what. 2 days later, Seung-ho intercepted a communication between Yong-soo's intermediary and the Yoon family's financial officer. The communication detailed the full arrangement. Yong-soo's betrayal, the shipping contracts, the fake nonprofit, the surgery bait, all of it. Seung-ho brought the transcript to Min-jun. Min-jun read it in his penthouse office. He read it once. He read it again. He set it down on his desk. He did not throw anything. He did not yell. He sat in complete silence for 11 minutes. Seung-ho waited. He had never seen Min-jun this still. It was more frightening than any anger would have been. Min-jun picked up his phone and called his father. "I know what you did." Yong-soo was silent for 3 seconds. "I did it for this family." "You are no longer part of this family." He hung up. Then he went to Florence. He drove to Tempe himself, no Seung-ho, no security detail. He pounded on her apartment door with his fist, not his knuckles. Florence opened it. Her eyes were red. Swollen, she had been crying. The hope that had broken through was still written on her face, raw and exposed. "They told me they can fix my eyes, Min-jun," she said. And Min-jun stood in her doorway and realized that the next words out of his mouth were going to destroy the first real hope this woman had felt in 3 years. The hope he could see on her face like sunrise. And it was his fault. All of it. His world had reached into hers and poisoned the one thing she wanted most. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "We need to talk," he said. Min-jun told her everything. The Yoon family, the clinic acquisition, his father's involvement, the fake nonprofit, Cynthia, who did not work for any grant program, the surgery offer that was not generosity but a weapon. Florence listened. She stood by her kitchen counter with her hands flat on the surface, fingers spread, as if she needed the solidity of the countertop to keep her upright. She did not cry. She did not scream. She went perfectly, terribly still. When he finished, she said the words that cut deeper than anything anyone had ever said to him. "You knew about the surgery. You knew it existed. You knew about the clinic. How long have you known?" Min-jun hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. "Get out." "Florence, you knew there was something that could give me my sight back, and you didn't tell me. You made that decision for me, just like everyone else. Just like Grant. Just like every single person who has decided they know what's best for the blind woman. Get out of my apartment." She opened her front door. Her hand was steady on the knob. Her voice was steady. Everything about her was steady except the single tear that slid down her left cheek. Min-jun wanted to argue. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell her that he was trying to find a solution before bringing her the problem, that he was trying to protect her from false hope. But he heard her words, "You made that decision for me," and he understood with devastating clarity that she was right. He had done exactly what everyone else in her life had done. He had treated her like someone to be managed instead of someone to be trusted. He left. Florence closed the door. She stood behind it for a long time. Then she walked to her couch and sat down and did not move for 4 hours. She changed her phone number the next day. She stopped going to the cafe. She stopped leaving her apartment. The world she had been slowly shrinking for 3 years collapsed to the size of 4 walls and a locked door. Noel flew in from Memphis on the first available flight. She found Florence sitting on her kitchen floor in the middle of the afternoon, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to her chest. Not crying, just sitting. The lights were off. They were always off. "Flo," Noel whispered. "Don't say his name." "I wasn't going to. I was going to say your name. Florence, you need to eat." Florence did not eat. Not that day, barely the next. Min-jun handled it differently. He went to work. He took meetings. He closed a massive real estate deal in Beverly Hills without changing expression. He reviewed quarterly projections with his CFO. He approved a new security contract in Palo Alto. From the outside, he was functioning perfectly. Seung-ho saw the truth. Min-jun had stopped eating full meals. He slept 3 hours a night at most. He stood at his penthouse window in the dark and stared at the city below and saw nothing. The man who controlled a billion-dollar empire was hollowed out by the absence of one woman who had spilled coffee on his shirt in a department store 6 weeks ago. Seung-ho broke his own rule. 8 years of working for Min-jun, and he had never once offered personal advice. Professional counsel, strategic recommendations, tactical assessments, yes, but never personal. He sat across from Min-jun in his office on a Thursday evening and said something that landed like a grenade. "You are the most powerful man I have ever known, but you're losing the only person who ever made you human. Fix it. Not with money, not with protection, not with strategy. Fix it by being the man she actually needs, not the man who decides things for her, the man who trusts her enough to decide for herself." Min-jun stared at him. "That's all," Seung-ho said and left the room. Min-jun sat alone for a long time. Then he moved. In 48 hours, he made 3 decisions that would reshape everything. First, he cut his father off completely. Yang-soo was removed from all park consolidated accounts, stripped of board access, and blocked from every communication channel within the organization. It was surgical, clean, absolute. Second, he contacted Dr. Choi Hae-won in Seoul directly, the semi-retired specialist who had pioneered the retinal procedure. Min-jun flew to Seoul on his private jet, walked into Dr. Choi's office at Samsung Medical Center, and sat across from a 63-year-old surgeon who had turned down every patient referral for the past 2 years. Min-jun did not offer money. He did not leverage connections. He told Dr. Choi about a woman in Arizona who had lost her sight and her hope, and who deserved the chance to get both back. He told the truth. It was the most honest Min-jun had been with a stranger in his entire adult life. Dr. Choi agreed to review the case. Third, Min Jun secured the surgical commitment. No strings, no Yoon involvement, no conditions. He covered the full cost himself, not as a transaction, not as leverage, as the only thing he could give Florence that she actually needed, a real choice. He flew back to Scottsdale with the surgical plan, Dr. Choi's direct contact information, and a personal letter from the doctor to Florence explaining the procedure, the risks, the recovery timeline, and the expected outcomes. He did not go to Florence's apartment. He went to Noel. He met her at a coffee shop in Tempe, not far from Florence's building. He handed her the file. He handed her the letter. He said, "Give this to her. Tell her it's real. Tell her there are no conditions. She never has to see me again if she doesn't want to, but she deserves to have this choice. She deserves to make it herself." He turned to leave. "Min Jun," Noel said. He stopped. "You should know. She hasn't stopped talking about you, even when she's angry, especially when she's angry. That woman in there is my sister, and I have never seen her care about anyone the way she cares about you. Not even Grant. And Grant she was going to marry." Min Jun did not turn around. He nodded once. Then he walked out of the coffee shop and got into his car and sat there for a very long time. Noel brought the file home. She sat next to Florence on the couch and read every word out loud. The procedure, the doctor, the success rates, the risks, the recovery timeline. Every word of Dr. Choi's letter, written in precise, kind, clinical language that somehow managed to feel personal. Florence listened. She asked Noel to read it again. Noel did. "Is it real?" Florence whispered. "There's a number for Dr. Choi's office. Call them yourself." Florence called. She spoke with Dr. Choi's patient coordinator who confirmed everything. The appointment, the availability, the no-conditions arrangement. Florence asked the coordinator to transfer her to Dr. Choi directly, and the coordinator did, which surprised Florence because she had expected barriers and gatekeepers. Dr. Choi spoke to her for 12 minutes. His voice was calm and precise. He told her the risks honestly. He told her the expected outcome honestly. 40 to 60% chance of partial restoration. Not full, partial. But partial meant shadows becoming shapes, shapes becoming faces, darkness becoming something less than total. Florence thanked him and hung up. She sat with the information for 2 full days. She did not call Min Jun. She did not talk about him. But Noel noticed that Florence had started moving again. She showered. She ate. She stood at her window and faced the sun she could feel but not see. On the 3rd day, Florence said, "I need coffee, the cafe in Old Town." Noel drove her. Florence walked in with her cane, 7 steps to the counter. Order, black coffee, 12 steps to the back wall, 3rd chair from the left. Min Jun was not there. He had stopped coming, respecting her boundary, giving her the space she demanded even though it was killing him slowly. Florence reached into her bag and pulled out a new phone. She had gotten it that morning. She dialed a number she had memorized from the surgical file, Min Jun's direct line. He answered on the 1st ring, not the 2nd, the 1st, as if he had been holding the phone for days waiting for a call he was not sure would ever come. "You didn't put any conditions on it," Florence said. "No." "Why?" A pause. She heard him breathe. She heard the chair creak as he shifted somewhere far away. "Because it was never about me getting something," he said. "It was about you having everything you were supposed to have." Silence, long, full, the kind of silence that holds an entire conversation inside it. "I'm at the cafe," Florence said. He was there in 14 minutes. He came through the door and she heard his footsteps. She knew them now, could pick them out of a crowd, and he crossed the cafe and sat down across from her. Neither of them spoke for almost a minute. Then Florence reached across the table and found his hand. She held it. She was crying quietly. He was holding her hand with both of his, and his grip was tight and his breathing was uneven. "I'm sorry I shut you out," she said. "I'm sorry I made the choice for you. Don't do it again." "I won't. I mean it, Min Jun." "I know, I won't." She squeezed his hand. "I want to do the surgery." "Okay. And I want you there." He brought her hand to his lips and pressed them against her knuckles and said, "I'll be there." They flew to Seoul 2 weeks later. Noel came. Seung-ho came, though he spent most of the time on the phone managing the empire from 8,000 miles away. The surgery was at Samsung Medical Center. It took 7 hours. Min-jun sat in the waiting room the entire time. He did not check his phone. He did not take calls. He did not pace. He sat in a plastic chair and stared at a set of double doors and waited. Seung-ho brought him coffee twice. Min-jun did not drink either one. When Dr. Choi finally emerged and said the procedure went well, Min-jun closed his eyes for 3 seconds. It was the closest he had come to prayer in 20 years. Florence woke up with her eyes bandaged. The doctor explained that they would not know the extent of the results for 72 hours. The bandages would stay on. 3 days of darkness. For Florence, darkness was not new. She had lived in it for 3 years, but this darkness was different. This darkness had a countdown. This darkness might end. Min-jun stayed with her. He sat beside her hospital bed. He read to her from a book Noel had brought, a mystery novel that he narrated terribly because he had none of Florence's vocal talent. Florence laughed at his reading and said he sounded like a GPS giving dramatic directions. He kept reading anyway. 72 hours later, Dr. Choi entered the room. Florence was sitting on the edge of her bed. Min-jun stood in front of her. Noel was beside her, gripping her hand so hard that Florence could feel her sister's pulse. Dr. Choi removed the bandages, layer by layer, slowly. The room was dim, the lights lowered to protect Florence's sensitive retinas. Florence's eyes were closed. "Whenever you are ready," Dr. Choi said, "open your eyes." The room held its breath. Florence opened her eyes. The world was not sharp. It was not the crisp, vibrant, full-color vision she remembered from 4 years ago. It was blurred at the edges, shapes without hard lines, colors muted like a painting viewed through frosted glass. But it was there. She could see light, actual light, the soft glow from the dimmed overhead fixture in the hospital room, the rectangle of the window, pale gray behind a curtain, the dark shape of furniture, and directly in front of her, slowly coming into focus like a photograph developing in real time, a face. Min-jun's face. She had never seen him before. In all the weeks they had spent together, through coffee and arguments and one kiss that changed everything and one fight that nearly destroyed everything, she had only known him through sound and touch. His voice, the scar near his ear that she had traced with her fingertip, the shape of his jaw that she had mapped with her hands in the dark. Now she saw him, not perfectly, not in high definition, but enough. Dark eyes, strong jaw, the scar she already knew, a thin line near his left ear, and an expression on his face that she did not need perfect vision to read. His eyes were filled with tears he was refusing to let fall. "Hi," she whispered. He broke. The tears fell. He did not wipe them. He did not look away. He did not hide. "Hi," he said. Noel was sobbing openly beside her, both hands pressed over her mouth. Dr. Choi was smiling the quiet, satisfied smile of a man who had seen this moment before and never tired of it. Florence reached up and touched Min-jun's face, but this time she watched her own hand do it. She watched her fingers move through the air, watched them make contact with his skin, watched them trace the line of his jaw from chin to ear. She was watching her hand touch someone's face for the first time in 3 years, and the simplicity of it, the miracle of something so ordinary, broke her open. "You're more handsome than I thought you'd be," she said through tears. Min-jun laughed. It was wet and broken and real. "You're more beautiful than I told you you were." Florence's vision improved steadily over the following weeks. Dr. Choi had been honest with her from the beginning. It would never be 100%. She would always have blurriness at the edges. She would need follow-up procedures. Some days would be better than others. But she could see. She could see faces. She could see the sky. She could see the color red, which she had been terrified of forgetting, and it was exactly as vivid as she remembered. She stood at Min-jun's penthouse window in Paradise Valley and watched the sunset over Camelback Mountain. She watched the sky turn orange and gold and then deepen into purple at the edges, and she laughed because Min-jun had once described it to her as orange juice spilled into a bruise, and he was right. It looked exactly like that. Min-jun dealt with the Yoon family the same way he dealt with everything. Strategically, precisely, without spectacle. He did not destroy them. He outmaneuvered them. Over the course of 3 months, he systematically dismantled their support network. Business partners in San Francisco who had backed the Yoons for a decade quietly withdrew their support after private conversations with Min Jun's representatives. Investors in Bellevue redirected their capital. Political contacts in Sacramento stopped returning calls. The Yoon operation was not destroyed. It was diminished. Reduced from a threat to an inconvenience to a footnote, they never came near Florence again. The fake nonprofit, New Vision Partners, was exposed and shut down. The doctor who had participated in the false consultation lost his medical license after an ethics board review that Min Jun's legal team initiated. Park Yong-soo tried to come back 6 weeks after the surgery. He showed up at the Paradise Valley penthouse unannounced, the way he always did, as if doors would always open for him because they always had. Min Jun let him in. He did not offer him a seat. Yang-soo stood in the living room, and his eyes found a framed photograph on the mantel. It was taken in Seoul, in the hospital garden, the day after Florence's bandages came off. Florence and Min Jun were sitting on a bench surrounded by cherry blossoms. She was looking at him, and he was looking at her, and neither of them was looking at the camera. Noel had taken it without them knowing. Yang-soo stared at the photograph for a long time. Something moved across his face. It was not quite remorse. It was not quite acceptance. It was the beginning of an understanding that had come too late but had come nonetheless. "Your mother would have liked her," Yang-soo said. Min Jun was quiet for a moment. The anger he expected to feel was not there, not gone entirely, but lighter, thinner, like a fog that was beginning to burn off. "Yes," Min Jun said, "she would have." It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was two men standing in a room acknowledging that the distance between them might not be permanent. That roads, even long and broken ones, sometimes led back to the same place. Yang-soo left quietly. Min Jun watched him go and felt something he had not felt in 2 years. Not peace, exactly. Something close. Something like release. 6 months after the surgery, Florence launched something new. Not a return to broadcast journalism. Something different. Something better. A podcast and YouTube channel where she told stories. Real stories about real people who had lost something they thought defined them and built something new from the wreckage. A woman in Nashville who lost her legs in a car accident and became a Paralympic swimmer. A teenager in Scottsdale who lost both parents and started a mentorship program for orphaned kids. A man in Palo Alto who lost his fortune and found purpose teaching financial literacy in underserved communities. Florence told their stories with the same voice that had once made sugar packet ingredients sound like literature. The audience grew fast. Tens of thousands of listeners in the first month. Hundreds of thousands by the third. There was something about her delivery, her empathy, the way she spoke about loss without self-pity and about hope without naivety, that resonated with people who had been through their own dark rooms and come out the other side. She recorded from a proper studio in Scottsdale. Min Jun had built it for her. She had fought him on it for 3 weeks, insisting she did not need it, insisting she could keep renting by the hour, insisting she was not going to be the woman who let a man solve her problems with money. "It's not a gift," Min Jun told her. "It's an investment. I expect a return." "And what return is that?" "Having to listen to you practice at midnight. I consider that fair compensation." She moved into the studio the next week. She and Min Jun did not rush anything. They had earned that patience through damage and repair. She kept her apartment in Tempe for 3 more months before she admitted to herself that she spent every night at the Paradise Valley penthouse anyway, and paying rent on an empty apartment was foolish. She moved in on a Saturday. Min Jun cleared half his closet without being asked, which Florence later told Noel was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for her. Noel visited every 6 weeks. She and Seung-ho had developed an unlikely friendship built on a shared commitment to keeping their respective people alive and functional. Noel called him Mr. Serious. He called her Miss Memphis. Neither of them admitted that they looked forward to seeing each other. On a Tuesday evening in November, Florence and Min Jun were in the back of his car, driving through Scottsdale. It was after dark. The city was lit up, streets lined with warm light, storefronts glowing, headlights streaming past in the opposite direction. Florence was looking out the window, really looking. watching the lights blur and sharpen and blur again as the car moved. She still marveled at it, every day. The simple, staggering act of seeing, a traffic light changing from red to green, the shape of a cloud, the way Minjun's jaw tightened when he was thinking about something he had not said yet. Small things, ordinary things, things that sighted people stopped noticing by the time they were 5 years old. Florence noticed all of them. She would never stop noticing them. She turned from the window and looked at Minjun. He was watching her. He did that often now, just watching her see things, as if her rediscovery of the visual world was something he wanted to memorize. "Do you remember what you said to me in the cafe?" she asked. "The very first time." He thought about it. "I said you missed." Florence smiled. It was the kind of smile that rearranged everything about her face, took every feature and turned it into evidence of joy. "I didn't miss," she said. "I found you." Minjun looked at her. The woman who had spilled coffee on his shirt in a department store and had not cared who he was. The woman who had not apologized properly and had argued with him and had pushed him away and had pulled him back. The woman who had made him feel something for the first time in years and had terrified him because of it. The woman who had demanded honesty and given it in return and had refused to be managed or pitied or defined by what she could not do. He took her hand. "You found me," he agreed. The car drove on through the Scottsdale night. The city glittered on both sides of them. Florence watched every single light. Some people come into your life like a collision. Sudden, messy, unplanned. A white cane and a ruined shirt and a crumpled napkin aimed 6 inches in the wrong direction. And sometimes that collision is not an accident at all. Sometimes it is the universe throwing 2 broken people at each other hard enough to crack them open so that something new can grow in the spaces between. Florence gave Minjun a reason to feel. Minjun gave Florence a reason to hope. And together, they built something that no rival family, no scheming father, no threat, and no fear could tear apart. A love that started blind and ended with wide-open eyes. A story that began with spilled coffee and a ruined shirt, and ended with a woman watching the sunset over Camelback Mountain and knowing, for the first time in years, that the best part of her life was not behind her. It was right here, in focus, and it was just beginning.